Forget what you learned in school. This is History's Unhinged Side. Welcome to Lifespan, the weekly podcast that digs up the dirt on the most outrageous, chaotic, and downright WTF lives ever lived.
All told in a fun and fascinating way.
Exactly. Today we're plunging into the truly wild story of Mary Shelley. I mean, her life was every bit as captivating and honestly as unsettling as her most famous creation, Frankenstein.
Oh, absolutely. Just try to imagine it. You're, 19 years old? And you come up with one of the most enduring horror stories ever written. It's incredible.
Really?
Her life, she was born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin in 1797, and it was just this whirlwind of radical ideas, societal scandal, really intense love, and almost unbelievable heartbreak.
Yeah, this bizarre journey isn't just about, literary genius, is it? It's about a life lived right on the absolute fringes.
Mm-hmm.
From her completely unconventional upbringing, daughter of these major radical thinkers, right up to the frankly bizarre act of keeping her dead husband's heart.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
Oh, yeah. Get ready for the WTF moments and the super detailed events that really molded this remarkable woman.
So today on the Lifespan podcast, we're sort of unpacking your testimonies about Mary Shelley, trying to piece together the extraordinary circumstances that led to this life that was, anything but ordinary.
Yeah, our mission, I guess, for this bizarre journey is to cut through the usual historical fluff.
Right.
And really shine a light on the fascinating and, let's be honest, sometimes unbelievable parts of her story.
So where do we start? The beginning seems right.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning with her revolutionary roots. Mary's life really began under the shadow of her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft.
A towering figure.
Absolutely, a real pioneer.
Yeah.
Back in 1792, she was already arguing, forcefully for equal education and rights for women.
Which was huge then.
Huge. Completely challenging that deep-seated idea that a woman's place was just in the home. That was a truly radical stance for the time, wasn't it?
It was incredibly radical. I mean, Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women. That was a groundbreaking text. It challenged the very foundations of how society saw women.
She argued they were rational beings.
Exactly. Fully capable of intellectual pursuits, not just, domestic stuff. But tragically, she died just days after Mary's birth. Complications from childbirth.
So Mary never actually knew her mother.
Never knew her, but that intellectual legacy, that presence was undeniable. You can sort of feel how it must have influenced Mary, fostering this pride, maybe a drive to live up to it.
Yeah, you can see how that idea of female intellect might have fueled Mary's own drive, right? Maybe even influenced Frankenstein itself, challenging those passive female roles.
It's definitely a compelling thought. And then there's her father, William Godwin.
Right. Every bit as radical, just in a different way. A famous political philosopher, anarchist beliefs.
Yeah, really championing reason, individual judgment. He actively nurtured Mary's intellectual side, didn't he?
Totally. Threw her into this incredible circle of thinkers, artists, writers. It's hard to imagine that not shaping her worldview from day one.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, I think, is how Godwin's own philosophy, while boosting her intellect, also sort of laid the groundwork for the unconventional life she'd lead.
How so?
Well, his questioning of institutions, marriage included, his focus on individual freedom, it likely resonated deeply with Mary's own rebellious streak.
Okay.
Even though, their relationship got pretty strained later after she eloped.
Right. It's almost paradoxical, isn't it? The guy championing freedom gets upset when his daughter actually uses it in a way he didn't expect.
Exactly. But yeah, talk about an unusual childhood. Their home was like a salon for interesting, sometimes controversial people.
You mentioned Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the poet.
Mm-hmm. He was around. And even former U.S. Vice President Aaron Burr.
Get out. Aaron Burr.
Yeah, apparently a huge admirer of Mary Wollstonecraft. He even hid out with them for a bit after his infamous duel with Alexander Hamilton.
Wow. That is not your typical childhood visitor.
Definitely not. Burr being there really highlights how the Godwin house was this hub for radical thought, for people living outside the norm. It tells you a lot about the atmosphere Mary grew up in.
Okay, so this intense, radical upbringing,
Yeah.
and then things take a very dramatic turn. Enter Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Right. The young, fiery, romantic poet. He was initially drawn to William Godwin's work.
And that's how he met Mary.
Yeah, they connected over shared intellectual interests, this mutual respect for Mary's mother's legacy. It started, as a meeting of minds.
But it didn't stay just intellectual, did it?
No, not at all. It quickly turned passionate and deeply scandalous for the time.
Because?
Well, the big thing was Percy was already married
Yeah.
with children, and Mary was only 16.
16. Okay, wow.
So this wasn't just some teenage crush. It was a deliberate, massive screw you to societal convention.
And they didn't exactly hide it. They eloped in the summer of 1814.
They did. And there's that wild, maybe apocryphal story.
Oh, the one about her mother's grave?
Yeah, that they might have consummated their relationship right there. Talk about a symbolic act of rebellion. Right?
Seriously. Whether it's true or not, it says a lot about their mindset. Just completely rejecting everything.
Absolutely. And they didn't go alone. Mary's stepsister, Claremont, went with them.
Claremont, right. We'll hear more about her later, I bet.
Oh, yes. So they sneak off to France. And, predictably, this was met with just outrage from Godwin, from Percy's family.
So they were basically cut off, no money, ostracized.
Pretty much. Stripped of financial support, social pariahs in many circles. You have to imagine the hardship, this very young, unmarried couple trying to survive in exile.
It's a huge decision. A total break from everything they knew.
They consciously chose it, living life purely on their own terms, whatever the cost. And yeah, Claremont's constant presence definitely added to that crazy dynamic, as you put it.
Especially later with Lord Byron.
Exactly. Her affair with Byron, having his daughter Allegra, it sort of cemented this image of a very unconventional, dramatic household. Almost a menage a trois, though maybe not in the strictest sense.
Okay, fast forward a bit to 1816. This is a huge year in this bizarre journey.
Absolutely pivotal. They spend the summer at Villa Diodati in Switzerland.
But Lord Byron.
And his doctor, John Polidori. And this wasn't just any summer vacation. It was 1816, the year without a summer.
Right, because of the Mount Tambora eruption.
Yeah.
Created this really weird, gloomy weather all over.
Yeah, volcanic ash blocking the sun. It made for this incredibly eerie, almost gothic atmosphere. Constant rain, dark skies.
Very fitting for what happened next.
Indeed. They were stuck indoors a lot, reading German ghost stories to each other.
And then Byron gets an idea.
He does. He proposes, maybe partly out of boredom, hey, let's each write our own ghost story.
A little contest.
Sort of. And Byron starts a vampire fragment. Polidori later writes The Vampire, which was hugely influential in its own right.
Mary.
But it was Mary who had the real breakthrough. The one that would change literature.
Tell us about that waking dream. What exactly sparked Frankenstein?
It's fascinating. She described it vividly later. One night, couldn't sleep, storm raging outside. She had this incredibly intense vision. Not quite asleep, not quite awake.
A waking dream.
Yeah. She saw this hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, through some powerful engine, some machine, it showed signs of life. Stirred.
Chilling.
Terrifying. That image, the scientist, the creature coming to life through unnatural means, that became the absolute core of Frankenstein.
And she was still just a teenager. It feels almost supernatural, doesn't it, that this idea came to her then?
It really does make you wonder what combination of her upbringing, her reading, the atmosphere, her own mind allowed for that at that age.
And Mary Shelley was supportive.
Oh, definitely. He really encouraged her to develop the idea, flesh it out beyond just a short story. Provided editorial feedback, too.
So he was part of the process.
He was. Frankenstein was eventually published anonymously in 1818. Reviews were pretty mixed at first.
Not an instant classic.
Not universally hailed, no. And there was ambiguity about who actually wrote it for a while. But eventually, Mary Shelley got the credit she deserved for this truly groundbreaking work.
But even with that success, relatively early on, Mary's life was just relentlessly marked by tragedy. It's hard to even talk about.
It's almost unbearable, the sheer amount of loss she endured, especially regarding her children.
Knows about that.
Well, her first daughter, Clara, died just weeks after being born prematurely. Then later, her little girl, Clara Everina, died in Venice in 1818. And then her beloved son, William, died in Rome in 1819.
Oh my God, 3 children lost.
3 children. Her journal entries from that time, they're just filled with profound grief, despair. You really feel the depth of her pain.
How does she even cope? How did she keep writing?
It's hard to fathom, and you have to wonder, don't you? Given all that loss, is Frankenstein's theme of bringing life from death? Is that just a Gothic trope for her? Or something deeply personal?
Like an exploration of her own anxieties? Maybe her desires about mortality.
It feels possible, doesn't it? Especially when you look at her later work, too.
And layered on top of losing her children, there was the situation with Percy's first wife, Harriet.
Right. Harriet drowned herself in late 1816.
Suicide.
Yes. And even though Mary and Percy were already together, had their own child by then, Harriet's death must have cast such a dark shadow. Maybe feelings of guilt, unease. It's complex.
It just adds another layer of sorrow to their already pretty dramatic lives.
Definitely a heavy burden for both of them, I imagine.
But the ultimate blow, the tragedy that really defined this period for her, Percy's death.
Yeah. Percy drowned in a boating accident in Italy in 1822.
And Mary was only, what?
24,
Yeah.
suddenly widowed with her only surviving child, Percy Florence.
Just try to imagine that. The grief must have been overwhelming. And the responsibility.
Immense. Suddenly she's a single mother in a time with very little support for women, and she's also the executor of Percy's literary legacy, which was complicated in itself.
So much loss, so young.
And as we touched on, these repeated, profound encounters with death, they had to have deeply influenced her writing. Frankenstein's themes, creation, loss, isolation, the power of death, that resonate so strongly with her own life.
Okay, so after Percy's death, we get to perhaps the most bizarre, the most talked about detail of her entire story.
Ah, yes. The heart.
The heart. Let's talk about Percy's heart.
Right. So you have to remember the context a little bit. The Victorian era had these really elaborate mourning rituals. Keeping locks of hair, death masks, stuff like that was relatively common.
Okay, so preserving memories of the dead was a thing.
A big thing. But Mary's actions were still pretty unusual even then.
What actually happened? Percy's body was cremated.
Yes, on a beach in Italy near Viareggio. Byron was there, Edward John Trelawney, Leigh Hunt. And during this beach pyre cremation, incredibly, his heart didn't burn.
It remained.
It remained intact. The explanation usually given is that maybe it had calcified due to an earlier bout of tuberculosis, making it resistant to the flames. But whatever the reason, it was astonishing.
That sounds like something straight out of one of their ghost stories. Almost unbelievable.
It really does. And then the story goes, Trelawney, this adventurous friend of theirs, actually snatched the heart from the cooling embers.
Oh, you grabbed it.
Reportedly plucked it right out, and eventually he gave it to Mary.
Okay. And what did Mary do with her dead husband's unburned heart?
She kept it for the rest of her life.
Kept it? Like, where?
She often kept it wrapped in silk, sometimes within a copy of Percy's poem Adonais, which was his elegy for Keats, and she stored it in her writing desk.
Wow. Just, wow. A physical piece of him right there with her.
It became this incredibly personal, almost talismanic symbol of their love, their connection, enduring through all that tragedy.
And what happened to it after she died?
After Mary's death in 1851, the heart was found among her possessions. It was eventually buried with their son, Percy Florence Shelley, years later.
That is such a powerful, tangible symbol of her commitment to his memory. Unwavering.
It really is. It speaks volumes, doesn't it? About the depth of her feelings, the intensity, and the utterly unconventional nature of their bond.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, with a life like Mary Shelley's, so extraordinary, so packed with drama and, frankly, weirdness.
Yeah.
It's no surprise there are lots of whispers and speculations, right?
Oh, definitely. Theories abound. One of the big ones we sort of touched on is the extent of her parents' influence on Frankenstein.
Right. How much was Wollstonecraft's feminism or Godwin's anarchism baked into it?
Exactly. Some scholars see direct lines pointing to themes of individual rights, critiques of society, questioning power.
Which are all there.
They are. But others emphasize Mary's own experiences more, the losses, her scientific curiosity, her unique imagination as the primary drivers.
So it's probably a mix.
It almost certainly is, a complex blend. Her parents gave her the intellectual toolkit, maybe, but her life and genius shaped the final product.
And what about her relationships with Percy and Byron? They've been analyzed endlessly, haven't they?
Oh, endlessly. Their intellectual collaborations were significant. Obviously, Percy editing Frankenstein, their shared readings and discussions.
But it was more than just intellectual.
Much more. The intense emotions, the romantic entanglements, the jealousy, the drama within that tight-knit circle that undoubtedly shaped their lives and filtered into their work. These were not calm, conventional relationships.
No kidding. And wasn't there some rumor about a possible love child?
Ah, yes. Elena Adelaide Shelley. There's intriguing speculation that Percy might have fathered a child who was registered under his name in Naples in late 1818 or early 1819, but whose maternity is unclear.
So another woman involved. Or maybe even Claire again.
The theories vary. Some suggest a servant girl, others have different ideas. Definitive proof is lacking, but the mystery persists. It just adds another layer of complexity and intrigue to their story.
It really does. Now, it's so easy to just think Frankenstein when you hear Mary Shelley. But she wrote a lot more, didn't she?
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial to remember she was a prolific professional writer beyond that one famous novel.
Like what else?
Well, she wrote other significant novels. There's Valperga, a historical novel, Ludor and Faulkner, which dealt with more contemporary social themes, and importantly, The Last Man.
The Last Man. What's that about?
It's fascinating, actually. Published in 1826, it's this apocalyptic science fiction novel about a plague wiping out humanity in the late 21st century, really ahead of its time.
Wow, early sci-fi.
Definitely. It shows her range. She also wrote short stories, plays, biographies, including lives of Italian and Spanish literary figures and travelogues based on her journeys.
Really versatile.
Incredibly versatile, engaged with all sorts of intellectual and social issues of her day.
And after Percy died, she took on the huge task of editing his work, right?
Yes, that became a major focus for her. She dedicated herself to editing and publishing his poems and essays posthumously.
Which was important for his reputation.
Absolutely crucial. Percy's reputation as a major romantic poet owes a huge debt to her tireless work. She faced real obstacles doing it too: societal pressure, disapproval from his conservative family who controlled the estate.
But she pushed through.
She did. It shows her deep affection for him, but also her serious intellectual commitment to his legacy.
And even later in life, she didn't just retreat.
Not at all. She traveled extensively in Europe, particularly with her son, Percy Florence, and his wife. She wrote about her travels. She remained connected to intellectual and political circles.
Just shows her resilience, doesn't it? Her enduring curiosity despite everything.
Absolutely. A truly formidable intellect and spirit.
And the legacy of Frankenstein itself. I mean, it's just immeasurable, isn't it?
Completely. Its impact on literature, film, theater, pop culture, it's everywhere. It's been adapted countless times.
It's become this go-to story when we talk about scientific ambition.
Right.
Or the definition of humanity.
Exactly. It's a touchstone. And her contribution to science fiction and gothic horror is groundbreaking. It's really considered one of the earliest true sci-fi novels.
That blend of horror and science.
It was revolutionary, exploring the potential consequences of scientific advancement in that way.
And 2 centuries on, we're still unpacking it.
Still analyzing it through different lenses: feminist, psychoanalytic, historical. Its themes of ambition, creation, alienation, responsibility, they just keep resonating.
Speaks to contemporary anxieties too, I guess.
For sure. Mary Shelley tapped into something fundamental about the human condition and our relationship with knowledge and power.
Okay, let's dig into some of those deep cuts now. Those curious little details that maybe paint an even stranger picture.
Yeah, those fascinating bits, like the fact that despite never having formal schooling, she was incredibly well-read, entirely self-educated, just devouring books from her father's library. Remarkable curiosity.
And that rather gothic detail we mentioned earlier, the rumor about losing her virginity on her mother's grave.
Right. Again, whether fact or symbolic folklore, it highlights the sheer unconventionality, maybe even the transgressive nature of her bond with Percy right from the start.
Definitely not your standard courtship narrative. And her childhood home with visitors like Aaron Burr.
Yeah, Burr apparently formed quite a close bond with Mary and her stepsisters during his time there. Just another strange connection in a life full of them.
And her letters and journals, they offer real glimpses, don't they?
Oh, incredibly intimate glimpses. Like after her first baby died, she wrote about this recurring dream where she warmed the cold little body by the fire and it came back to life.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It reveals such deep emotion, such raw grief, connects you directly to her inner world.
Beyond Percy's heart, which is the ultimate macabre keepsake, were there other peculiar items she kept? Or strange habits?
That's a good question. While the heart is the most famous, exploring any other potential quirks or possessions would certainly add more layers. Sometimes those small details really illuminate a personality.
They do. They make these historical figures feel more real, more complex.
Exactly. These deep cuts move beyond the legend to the perhaps even stranger reality.
So for our listeners on this bizarre journey who are now totally hooked and want to dive even deeper into Mary Shelley's world, where should they look? What are the resources?
Well, there are some fantastic places to start. Online, the Shelley.WOULDN archives is amazing digitized manuscripts, letters.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And the New York Public Library and the Bodleian Library at Oxford also have significant online archives related to the Shelleys and Godwins. You can find lots of letters and journals on places like the Internet Archive, too.
What about visual stuff? Documentaries?
Definitely. There are good YouTube documentaries like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a
Yeah.
documentary, and platforms like PBS often have great video essays or segments exploring her life and work.
And books. Biographies?
Loads. Miranda Seymour wrote a very comprehensive one. Muriel Sparks is insightful. Anne K. Mellor is a key feminist scholar on Shelley. Plus, countless scholarly articles digging into specific aspects.
And online communities.
Sure. Places like Reddit have forums discussing her life and work. Various blogs, podcasts dedicated to literature or history often feature her. Lots of perspectives out there.
Great, so plenty for people to explore. Okay, wrapping up this bizarre journey, Mary Shelley's life is just an unfiltered, unforgettable story, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. From those radical beginnings, the scandalous elopement defying everyone, to birthing this literary monster that still haunts us.
And keeping her husband's actual heart in her desk.
Right. Her life was this incredible tapestry of brilliance, rebellion, intense love, and just staggering tragedy.
And really, this exploration has only scratched the surface of her wild, kind of crazy existence, a life that just keeps fascinating us.
How could it not? I mean, a teenager creates a timeless myth, defies every convention imaginable, holds on to a symbol of love that literally defies death. It's captivating.
Her story is such a powerful reminder, isn't it? The truth can be way stranger and honestly far more compelling than fiction.
Definitely. What stands out most to you about her? Her defiance.
Yeah.
The sheer emotional intensity.
Maybe the resilience through all that loss, coupled with the sheer audacity of her choices. And it makes you wonder, what other unhinged lives are out there in history, hidden behind the standard narratives?
That's the core of Lifespan, isn't it? Finding those stories.
Yeah. Exactly. This bizarre journey into Mary Shelley's world really leaves us with a big question, I think. How do these extraordinary, often traumatic, circumstances actually shape extraordinary creations?
A profound question indeed. Something for everyone to think about.